Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leader Without podcast. Today, I have a phenomenal guest for you guys. I'm honored. I'm blessed. I'm humbled. I have Mr. Paul Dunn, the co-founder of B1G1, one of the most wonderful organization in the world, which is all about doing good, helping, and giving back, and making this world a better place. It's an absolute honor. I am speechless. Sometimes, please forgive me if I can't find the right word, but I'm beyond honored to have Mr. Paul Dunn on the show. Paul, welcome to the show.
I'm loving you. I'm loving your words.
Very welcome. It's an absolute honor.
And I'm loving being here. It's absolutely my privilege to be with you. And a big thank you, not just for you organizing this, but a thank you to all the people listening. Thank you so much for taking that choice. And I'm hoping that together with Payman, we're going to create some moments that you'll remember and perhaps make some other choices on, which will be great.
Absolutely. This will do. But before we get to talk about what you do at the B1G1 level, let's get to know you, the person. So tell us, for people that don't know you, who's Paul at the personal level?
Well, I'm
a human being.
A little older. Yeah, he's a human being, and he thinks he's a very lucky human being. Just to give you an example of that, every morning I do a 5K run. Wow. And I did my 5K run this morning, and just before I got in the shower, I cleaned my teeth, and I thought, how lucky am I to be able to go running on a road, and it's beautiful, and it's in this almost like this rainforest environment here in Singapore, and I see the monkeys and all of that kind of stuff. And I get home, and here I am with a beautiful hot shower. Just turn the tap on, and there it is. And then I can dry off, I can go have a cup of coffee, and all of that sort of stuff, and it gets better from there. And so I see my entire life that way, actually, that theoretically you're supposed to have this kind of hero's journey story, where everything goes wrong, and sure enough, I was born a long time ago. I was born in a tiny little mining village. Actually, my dad was a coal miner, and we were not particularly wealthy, I guess. And again, I got lucky. I was studying in London, and I got headhunted by Hewlett Packard, and I became one of the first 10 people in Hewlett Packard in Australia. So that gave me this kind of geeky kind of thing. But how brilliant. I mean, we're talking about leaders with heart. How brilliant. Just think about that for a minute. Way back in 1966. That's a long time
Yesterday.
Ago. Yes. And here I am sitting with Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett, the guys who created Silicon Valley. And just a couple of years ago, well, actually, in December 2019, just pre the pandemic, I was on a flight to speak in San Jose in Silicon Valley to 5,300 accountants, which is kind of exciting. And on the way over, one of the things I love about planes is you can get a lovely choice of movies. And there was this movie, and it was called Silicon Valley, and it was all about how it started, way back when. And I thought, wow, it's so amazing that there are these great leaders that do things differently and are revered, as a result of doing that. So, I see my from there, just very quickly, I went and I created one of Australia's first computer companies, which was pretty exciting to do. Then I went to, you'll love this. I went to a seminar. We didn't even know what a seminar was in those days. But it was with someone I'm sure you've heard of, and that is Jim Rohn, or James Rohn. And for me, it was like a time travel. It was like this spiral. I was, and I all of a sudden saw that I was him, and that I really had this, everybody has these moments, don't they? And it was one of these moments when I thought, that's me. So, I called up my colleagues in the computer company and said, I'm out of here. They said, can you give us a little bit of time? And I did. And so April the 1st, actually, in 1981, I created something called the Results Corporation. And again, incredibly lucky, we were doing the marketing for 23,000 small to medium scale enterprises. And then I realized that all of those enterprises had accountants, so, mandated by law almost. And so I thought there's an interesting opportunity here, because most, to do good, because most accountants at that time, and still today, sadly, are reporting on history. And I thought, how cool would it be if we could take accountants and get them to work with their selected clients so that together they could create history. And that was an amazing experience. And then in 2000, I sold all of that and went to live in France for a little while, in Provence, which was our most grounded time.
Amazing.
Very grounded. And then then in 2007, here I was mentoring this, one of your guests on the podcast is Johann Nogueira from, and his wife Kiero is from Japan. So here I was in 2007 mentoring this young lady. Her name is Masani. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like when you're mentoring someone. As the mentor, you have the privilege of asking the questions, and the mentee is supposed to answer them, right? Sure. And so she comes into this room, and she looked, I don't want to say disheveled, that's because that's not true, but it was clear that she had, quote unquote, been somewhere in her mind, if you will. And so she said in this lovely Japanese accent, she said, can we change our session then? I said, sure. And she said, what I'd like to do is ask you a question. And I said, sure, go for it. And she said, well, it's not so much a question. I want you to imagine something. And I said, go for it. And she said, well, I want you to imagine a different world. So I want you to imagine a world where every time business is done, something great happens, right, in our world. Now, at the time, I was what would be called an Aussie bloke, which means, you kind of very outward in your expressions and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So she said that, and I said, oh yeah, that would be great, And she was smart enough to realize that I didn't really get it at all. So she said, I don't think you get it. And I said, well, help me. And she said, well, I've given it a name. It's called Buy One, Give One. And I said, okay, so how does that work? And she said, well, imagine you go to an electronics store. For those of you listening in the US, let's say to Best Buy or something like that, right? And you want to buy a plasma TV. And you buy the plasma TV. I said, whoa, hang on a second. What did you say this thing is called? And she said, well, in my mind, I've called it Buy One, Give One. So I said, well, Masami, if I go to a store and buy a plasma TV, they're not going to give me another one. That's like a crazy business model, right? And so she said, no. She said, still don't understand. And I said, well, help me. She said, well, just think about it. Why do you go buy that plasma TV? You want to do that because you want better vision, like a bigger or brighter or something like that. So how would it be, she said, if when you did that, someone who could not see got the gift of sight? And I went, oh. Oh. And she could see that happening. And then I happened to be surrounded by books at the time. And she said, when an author sells a book, or how would it be if every time that happened, a tree got planted? This is in 2007.
Wow.
And then, I had a cup of coffee alongside me. So she said, someone sells a cup of coffee and somebody like a kid in need gets access to life-saving water. And I said, Masami, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life?
Wow.
And that was one of those game-changing moments. And it's so interesting. You don't know how to do it. And so, but it sounds great, right? So then you've got to spend, a whole lot of time and energy and resources trying to figure it out. And it took us 3 years to figure that out. And it's all about doing tiny things. And we may talk about that later, because I'm not meaning to talk about B1G1 at this point, but it's just such a crucial point, in terms of those moments that, so, just 4 weeks ago, we crossed a 250 million giving impacts. Right? And so the message for those again, thank you so much for listening, is it's important to, someone once said to me, Paul, the most important 18 inches in life are the 18 inches between your head and your heart. Right? And it's not that easy to go there. But what's so interesting is when you do, you start to see everything in a totally different light. And you start to understand that very tiny actions can bring massive things. I mean, for example, those of you listening don't know this at this point, but Polman and I are actually talking on Zoom. Now, it turns out that I have a little automatic thing in B1G1, as do a lot of other people. That means every time we talk on Zoom, 11 kids get access to education just by you and I talking on Zoom.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So, and that was very obviously.
How can more people do that? Because I spend most day talking on Zoom. I would love to do that. How can I do that? You're getting me excited now. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a moment.
About how you do it later. No, that's good. Okay. And I seriously. No, but I think about this as well. I said to everyone joining us, I said, thank you so much for taking the choice. And the most interesting thing about that is that where we are now, someone once said to me, they said, Paul, where you are in life right now is simply a result of all of the choices you've made at those moments, those critical moments in your life. It's the amalgamation of all of those moments. And what's happened is that since that happened, it's the weirdest thing, right? Is it the hypothalamus? Something that or the reticular activation system, whatever it is in our bodies, or the universe just combines so that. When you take that step, you just get to connect with other things and with other people, and you become, you just keep on that journey. And so a friend of mine says, we our environment dictates our performance, and I think there's some real truth in that as well. And so again, getting back to lucky, right? I mean, how lucky can you be that in 2007, you have that conversation that just leads you to, amazing things.
Absolutely. Sometimes this the most, mundane conversation, or just a single question, because questions can be amazingly powerful. If you ask the right question, can take a completely different path and open a different world for you that you had no idea. And we'll get out to it in a moment, but let me first continue asking you a couple of questions to get to know you at a personal level. So tell us, Paul, what makes you happy?
Connecting makes me happy. And at the same time, knowing that, let's just talk about that for a minute, because one of my, and particularly now, right? Because one of my fellow TEDx speakers, one of the great things, again, I've been lucky enough to do 4 of them. You get to meet, the other people who do great things, right? So one of the people I met was Brene, as in Brene Brown, and I'm sure many of our listeners would, have watched Brene on Netflix, and we would have seen her amazing first talk that she did. Where she talked about vulnerability. And it's funny how, things kind of come around. And Brene is like, she's this really, really sort of happy person. But there's one moment in her first TED talk where she slows down and she talks about her studies at the University of Texas in Houston. And she talks about how she's dealing with this, I think she may have said epidemic or something like that, of particularly boys, teenage boys, who were just saying it's over and taking steps to make sure it was. And she paused and she said this. She said, "Connection is why we're here. Connection," she said, "gives meaning and purpose to our lives." And I like to think about that in the reverse as well. That meaning and purpose sets us up for connection, right? So it's like this beautiful sort of circle. And so one of the things I think that happens, particularly now, without wishing to make light of any of the circumstances that people may be in, and I'm not a trained counselor. I'm not, and I don't plan to be. But what I find really interesting is when people, particularly now, because of the circumstances, they, for whatever reason, they kind of feel lost and alone. And Polman, you'll know this, being a guy. What guys do when that happens, they go into their cave, right? And we just cut everything off and we're not going to talk to anybody, that's what we do. And so if you went to the, people, they would say, well, go and look inside, because the answer is inside. I don't think it's inside at all. I think what we have to do is look outside, because when we look outside, particularly with that heart-centered view, we see things that the quote-unquote ordinary person just wouldn't see. And we realize that, there's some things that we can do some things about. And we realize that there are other people who, need that connection as well. Like, give you a very simple example. Here in Singapore, we are very lucky. There's no need to have a car, although some people do, but it becomes a status symbol for them. But because the public transport system is literally
same thing
amazing.
in Hong Kong. Yes, I know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what it's like, right?
Yeah.
And so I can literally go down, literally outside the condo here, and there's a bus. It sounds extraordinary, perhaps some people, but every 30 seconds going someplace, right? And so when I get on the bus, here's what I do. We have these little plastic cards that we swipe and go beep, and I make sure that as it's beeping, that I look and just catch the attention of the bus driver, which could be male or female. And I just look at them and I say, "Thank you for stopping." And they're like, "What?" I'm supposed to stop. Someone had their hand out. Someone pressed the bell, right? And when I do that, I sometimes fantasize. I mean, it doesn't matter if this doesn't happen, but I think that, at the end of the day, when they get home to their family, "Oh, what happened today, darling?" "Well, it was really weird. At bus stop number 172, this strange guy got on and said, 'Thank you for stopping.' Can you believe that sort of thing?" So, it's just an example of
Makes their day.
Yeah. And I think that leads to this whole idea that we are all at our best when we're giving. And I don't mean by that, when we're giving money or anything like that. I simply mean when we're looking outwards and giving, helping the little old, the classic little old lady kind of thing across the road. And the point is, when we cut ourselves off, we can't do that. We absolutely cut ourselves off, right? And so if the pandemic has been, taught us anything, which I do hope it has, it is that we are all connected. We can't, there's no way we can get away from that. We are all connected, right? And once we understand that we're all connected and that we should not be sitting in judgments and all those sorts of things, then, you start to create a very different place, right? And
Absolutely.
that's where I think we can all go.
Absolutely. Before continuing further, you said one thing that really caught my attention. I would like you to expand. You know, we keep on hearing, look inside to find the answer. And you said, don't look inside, go outside. And I would like you to
Look
expand on
outside.
that. What do you mean by it? Do you mean that because sometimes we might have limited experience, and that's why even though we try to look inside, we may not be able to find the right answer. That's why we need to look outside to get either whether it be books, mentors, or other external sources
Yeah.
to expand our knowledge, our experiences. Is that what you mean? That
Well,
look
let me
outside?
give you a very simple example, right? And
Mhm.
in fact, let me give you two simple examples.
Please.
So before that meeting with
Mhm.
Masani, right? Before that meeting, she had been a year before that, she had been backpacking in India.
Wow.
And and so she saw some things that, aren't particularly pleasant, right? She saw children starving, she saw, all of that kind of stuff. And it was because of that that she said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to create a business where, and it was a little tiny food business back in Australia. And I was mentoring on that thing. I'm going to create a little food business where every time someone buys one of our meals, we're going to try and make something good happen.
Wonderful.
That was really the initial thing. And she said, and what we're going to do is we're going to drive that into India so that some of these things that I saw will not happen anymore. Now, just last week, there was, I'm not sure whether you use Canva as the sort of drawing thing that, or presentation thing that so many people use every day, and it's a lovely thing. That was founded by a lady called Melanie Perkins.
Wow.
And not that long ago, I think it's about 8 years ago. And she had exactly the same experience, well, pretty much the same experience. She happened to meet this rickshaw guy, and she met him at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, like almost 24 hours apart. And she asked him, so how much do you earn as a result of doing this? And it turned out to be $1 a day. And she said, that cannot happen. I'm going to fix that. And that was when she formed Canva. And just last week, how about this? Canva was valued at $55 billion. And Melanie's share of that happens to be 12 billion. And she announced that she's giving it all away.
Wow.
Because that was the reason she started something. So in other words, here's the way I think about it in a company kind of sense. I look at it and I think there are really two, if you wanted to make it really simple, and let's do some sort of binary thing. So I think that there are two types of companies. There's kind of like standard and there's stand out.
Yes.
Now, what is it that makes the stand out company? And I'm a great fan of alliteration, of the power of words. And so what I talk about sometimes is that you move from standard to stand out by standing for something. And that standing for is bigger than yourself. It's got to be bigger than yourself. It's that North Star, you know what I mean, that Stephen Covey spoke about all those years ago. Yeah. So
I love that. And if I may, I will borrow that and some of my website and stuff. Don't be a
go standard to stand out and stand for.
I love that. I love that analogy. I love that. Perfect.
Oh, no, it's yours.
Okay, thank you. That's amazing. Now let's get back to a couple of more questions about you. What makes you smile?
Well, hopefully I'm doing it all the time.
Yes.
Probably because that seems to be how I spend most of my time. I think what makes me do the other thing, as in someone said to me the other day, you roll your eyes so beautifully. And that's like the scale, you know, you go,
That's a skill. Not anyone can do that.
Yeah, and that occurs to me that occurs for me when I see something, and I'm trying to fix this. I really am trying to fix it. When I look and I go, you know, there's a better way of doing that, or something like that. And so, but you know, sometimes you know, judgment kicks in, and you go, oh gosh, yeah. So that's something that I'm working on fixing. So, like I said, you know, this morning, I mean, you know, let's just look at now as a for example. I'm just looking up to my right because I can see what time it is, right, on the top of my Mac here, and I see that it's 10:36 in the evening. Right. I also know that in about 24 minutes I have another one to do, and so that'll be midnight, and I have another one at 5:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So. But how could you not be here having the privilege of talking with you? And when I say you, I don't mean you, Polman, necessarily, although that is a privilege. But you know, you've leveraged that via the Leaders with Heart podcast. And so, you know, if you're listening in your car or wherever it is right now, or on the public transport, you know, I just want to sort of come through that earpiece, I should say. Radiating in whatever way that I can. So, you know, that means you and by the way, I think how you get there, going back to that bus driver story, is you just do everything you can to live a life that's grateful in some way. You know, remember I was talking about the hot shower. How can you not be grateful for the hot shower? How can you not be grateful for the fact that you can run around the road and, you know, not get attacked and, you know, whatever, right? So once you are in that space, then your heart just opens, and you know, and then, as you know, and I don't understand how it works, I really don't, but I understand that connects us in very different ways.
That's amazing. Wow. Wonderful. Now tell us what makes you sad and angry?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know that angry is the place that I go. I remember once I was supporting a fellow speaker. Well, he's a speaker now. He was just trying to do that. It was pretty much his first gig, and a while ago. And I'll say his name is Fred. He's relatively famous now. So, so if I say his name, people may know, and that wouldn't be fair. So, so I said, "Oh, Fred, you know, I'd love to come and be in the audience and sort of be there, you know, sort of rooting for you, kind of thing." And he said, "Oh, would you do that?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to do that." So I'm sitting in the audience, and you know, and I'm nodding away and, you know, smiling at the right time, sort of giving him thumbs up and all of that. And he said, and right now he said, we're going to talk about failure. And he said, and there's someone in the audience who I know would have something just extraordinary to say about failure. And he's looking straight at me. And I'm going, don't do it. Please don't do it. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, you know, here's Paul Dunn. And Paul, come on out here, because, you know, I know, you know, you can't have success without failures. And so I know you've experienced a lot of that. So, you know, and I'm going, no, Fred, I'm just here for you, and I'd love to sit here. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, that's just Paul playing hard to get. Let's just give him a big round of applause. I'm going, ah. So anyway, now I'm left with no choice, right? And so I'm out the front of it. I'm out the front, and it's funny when you see the video back. It's really, really funny. Well, it's kind of weird actually. So he says, so I'm right close to him. And he says, so Paul, let's talk about failure. And I'm saying, well, Fred, well, yeah, that would be, you know, kind of like I'm umming and ahhing, right, like this. And what's happening is I'm also walking backwards. I don't even know it, but I'm walking backwards. And finally I get against this wall and I can't go any further. And I'm like about maybe 12, 15 feet away from where he is. And I can see he's got this kind of weird look on his face, like, what the heck is happening right now? And I hit the wall and I go, oh, and he said, are you okay? And I said, yeah. I said, but what I'm doing is I'm struggling right now. He said, tell me about the struggle. And I said, well, that word it's not in my head. I can't compute it. It's this. And still today, it's like really weird just even recounting that story. And he said, oh, you mean, yeah. He said, oh, you mean like it's a learning experience, you know? And I said, yeah, okay, Bingo. Let's say that. Yes. Thanks, Bingo. Fred. Rush back to the seat, you know. So I'm not sure that, I think anger would be, I mean, obviously, if someone is abusing someone or something like that. But one of the things that I've observed, you know, is that anger breeds anger.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and that's one of the reasons why, sadly, you know, we've got this sort of divisive thing going on, you know. And so it's a good idea, I think, not to go there, because all that happens is it just gets amplified. There's got to be a better way, I think.
Absolutely. Now let's move forward and talk about the beautiful thing you're doing now. So you mentioned something that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the genesis of B1G1 was that conversation you had with Masani back in 2007.
Yeah.
So tell us. So that was really the genesis and the seed that started all out. That it started all from this conversation. Wow.
That was it.
That's amazing.
It really was it, and it was like you know, complete, almost like a change of life. Well, it was in some ways. What I didn't know, and she didn't either, in fairness, she didn't know this, but what that actually meant, or it turned out to mean, can you fund this for the next 3 years, was basically what it was. But I mean, that was like, you know, sort of like a side issue. And although at the time, it was like a central issue to how do you make all these things happen? How do you, well, you've been there, you know, how do you build sites? How do you find projects that are great projects? How do you do that?
And how did you do that?
How did you build
that from ground up? I can imagine for sure.
Well, it's funny. Well, you know what the answer to that is? The answer to that is trust. That's the answer. Trust.
Yes, totally.
And I have to say that I can't think of a time when that has been misplaced at all. And again, I think it's like, you know, anger breeds anger, trust breeds trust, right? It's the same deal, you know. Oh, it's not the same deal, but you know what I'm saying. It's the same, the same result. So that, and then how do you build a model? I mean, the B1G1 model is really interesting. Like, how do you do something where you can, you know, here's the thing, right? We all know, it's in our DNA that, DNA reminds me of something. I'm going to just ask me about DNA in a minute, because I discovered something really interesting about DNA the other day. Not a world-shattering medical discovery, by the way, but an interesting discovery on DNA. So you know, traditionally in giving, you know, you hear people saying, well, when I'm successful, I'll, you know, and you go, well, what is it you don't understand about the journey? That it's like that is the journey. And so in B1G1, you know, you can literally, I'm being very literal, you can give from 1 cent. Seriously, from 1 cent.
I saw some projects, some countries for 1 cent. Yes, absolutely.
1 cent projects. Yeah, amazing.
Absolutely.
And you might think, come on, seriously? Yes.
Yeah.
Of the you know, and you can do that in interesting ways because you can then embed it. So you can, I mean, here's an interesting thought, right? I have a thing on, and I'm not the only one who does this, but anyways, but which says every time, you would have seen the emails that I send, and it says every time, you know, we send an email, a kid gets access to life-saving water.
Mhm.
Now that's a cent, right, to do that. So just for a minute, start to think about this. Right? Last time I checked, there were 2.7 odd on internetstats.com, 2.7 million emails sent per second, not per day, per second.
Yeah.
Okay? So just imagine if we all came together and did that.
1 cent per email.
Just,
And
do you see what I'm saying? You know,
I love that.
And isn't it interesting? And I once tried to get Steve Jobs. It didn't work, and it didn't work with Tim Cook either. But I don't know. Tim might be listening to the podcast, so I just mentioned it again. Do you remember how Steve Jobs used to say? You know, he would always say, "There's 3 things I want to talk about today," and then he would talk about the 3 things. You know, here's this magical thing, and I've called it an iPhone kind of thing. And then he would say, just one more thing. Right? Just one more thing, right? And everybody's always got to wait for that just one more thing. And so I was trying to have I never got the conversation, by the way, but I was trying to have the conversation where I said to him, I was going to say to him, Mr. Jobs, when you say just one more thing, how cool would it be if you said just one more thing? Every time you download an app, the kid gets access to education.
1 cent.
Yeah.
1 cent.
we should start a petition to Apple. By the way, that reminds me. Talking of Mr. Jobs, about 16, 17 weeks ago, I had another one of those moments, and it came in an email, and right in the middle of the email was a quote from Steve Jobs. And I want everybody to really listen, as in really listen to this quote. The first line of it you can sort of largely ignore, but I'll give you the first line. Okay, it's the second line that's the key. So he said, the storyteller is the most powerful person in the world. That's the first line. The second line is, the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just think about that for a minute. Just think about that. And when you think about that, just realize that we've all got a story. We've all got a story. But when you think about these times, then maybe, just maybe, we might find value in kind of like, shall we say, a different story. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. It turns out that a friend of ours is a guy called Paul Polman. Many of your listeners would know Paul, or of Paul Polman. He's such a heart-centered leader. He was the CEO of Unilever for a long, long time and turned that company into what we would call a business for good in spectacular ways. He is now the vice chair of the Global Compact. He also runs an amazing company called Imagine. And as it turns, and he's just about to release a book, actually, on the 5th of October, I believe it comes out. And the book, by the way, is called Net Positive. Wow. And it's called How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. And then there's this little line. I just want us to listen to this, because what this does is really what you're doing in what this line says. It's a fairly long line. but Polman, it's really what you're doing with the great work you're doing in the podcast. And by the way, with that story, the reason I mentioned that to on DNA, it's because the story is in our DNA. It really, really is.
Mhm.
And, you know, when our grandmothers sat them on the knee and said, you know, once upon a time, you know, all of that. And so we in these particular times, I think we do need to change up that story. Here's what Paul Polman had to say about it literally 48 hours ago. He said this: a great company is one that improves well-being. I want you, everybody, just listen to this, because the reality is that purpose powers profit, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
But you don't do it because
Mhm.
of the profit that will follow. You do it because it gets you on purpose. Listen to this. A great company is one that improves well-being for everyone it impacts and at all scales. Every product, every operation, every region and country, and for every stakeholder, including employees, suppliers, communities, customers, and even future generations and the planet itself.
Totally.
What that is saying is, and it's truly, isn't it? Because what that is saying is what we said before, that you move from standard to stand out because you stand for something bigger than you. And that's essentially what Paul is saying. And how I link that together. And by the way, there's you know, you said earlier on about questions. Remember, you said questions. Well, he asks a question, and here's a question for us to ponder once we finish listening to the podcast. And here's the question: is the world more positive because your business is in it?
Love that.
Isn't that a great question? Just such a
Absolutely.
great question. And by the way, if the answer to that is yes, right? Yes, it is.
You know,
Well, I would say, could you make it more positive still?
I will share a quick story. Is that the moment I made the shift to build my entire the foundation of my business from profit to impact, literally I saw magic and fall in front of my eyes. I got connected to people that normally, and I can bet on my life, I would have never got connected to them if I was still in a profit-driven business. For example, I'm talking to someone like you, and I've got connected to people at the highest level. People actually reached out to me that I would have never even dreamt of connecting with, all because I made the shift from profit to impact. Just like you said, purpose powers profit. I love that. Absolutely.
Or, you know, or if you know you want that another way, you could say that impact powers income, right? It's the same thing. Right?
Let me.
And by the way, just sorry, go ahead.
Now let me ask you another question that I really want to ask you based on what you said. You said that conversation with Masani back in 2007 steered your life to another direction. Now imagine if you hadn't had that conversation, where would have your path been today? Would we have been in the same path or different?
Well, I
path?
would. I know. I would not. I would not. Remember what I said. That where we're at today is a result of the moments or the choices that we made at the moments. Right now, I don't know what moments would have, but I seriously think. Not a pleasant thought, perhaps, but I seriously think that I may not be here, have been here, had that conversation. Because again, when we go visit the projects and we see all the stuff that's going on, and by the way, we don't go and visit projects to show them what they should be doing. We go to projects to learn. There's some just amazing stuff. That goes on that I could, spend hours talking about. Absolutely. So, but anyway, it's a good a good question, and that whole thing that but there's another way of thinking about that, by the way, and it is this. And again, the pandemic has amplified, right? Thankfully, right? It's this move from having to push yourself, push your product and all of that. It's this move to pull, and that just because of the attractiveness as to what you do. And I think that when you really switch and put that the heart thing at the center, then what happens? By the way, I talk about impact driven. I talk about entrepreneurs really should be impact driven. You know, imagine you were at a meeting. Remember the days when we used to have those, and you go up to some, yeah, you go up to someone and you say, what do you do? And the guy says, I'm an accountant. Now, what most of us would do, sorry, accountants, but you take this with a grain of salt. What most of us would do at that point is say, oh, I was just on my way to the toilet and, you know, I'll get back to you back. But
I love that.
But imagine that, just rewind it. And by the way, everybody listening to us should adopt this kind of way of saying it. So imagine you now, you meet again, different accountant, and you say, what do you do? And this guy says, oh, I'm an impact-driven accountant. Straight away, you can say, what's an impact? No, what's an impact-driven accountant? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Because
yes,
right? So we see that we measure ourselves, listen to this, we measure ourselves by the value we create for the people that we're privileged to serve, and the impact that we create with them, and the impact that we create in the world as a direct result of that.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. I want to be a part of that.
Totally.
So impact driven is that's a great place. Right?
I say something different. I'm saying something similar. When someone asks me, I used to say I'm an e-commerce guy. Okay, that's boring. Just change the topic and say. So now I say, what do you do? I say, well, what I do, I take kids from the streets and provide them with education. So what do you mean? So well, for every product we sell, we sponsor 1 year of education for a child in India. I say, wow, what is that? What are you selling? You know,
yeah, exactly.
So absolutely love that. So one more question I want to ask you about that fateful meeting with conversation with Masani. Do you think that conversation was meant to happen to bring you to fulfill your life's purpose and mission? Because clearly B1G1 is your real purpose to be on this planet in this lifetime. Do you think that was the predetermined, predestined, even pre-chosen by yourself before you were born? And hey, that meeting has to happen to bring me to where I'm supposed to go.
Let me answer that question this way. I'm not sure about that, but Masani is very sure. She's like, of course it was designed to happen, right? And then there were other things after that were that I could never have imagined experiencing. Absolutely. And that's it, right? Because when you just, we talked about trust and we talked about heart, and your heart knows, and you're there in this thing, and there's something for you to explore. Just go explore. Just go explore.
Absolutely.
Not internally, go explore externally, right? And this is a good example of it, right here, right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned another thing that absolutely blew my mind. You said each time you use Zoom, a kid in the world gets to benefit from it. So tell us how myself and everyone in the world can do that as well.
Oh, well, it's just because what you do in B1G1, you just instead of saying, the traditional way of doing this is to say, we proudly support, some charity somewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what B1G1 does is say, well, much better if you can, or not much better, but here's an interesting idea. What if you just could set up triggers or activities that you do in your business, and then each one of those triggers, you could control what it does. So for example, someone joins a mailing list, boom, this happens. Someone, you have a good phone call, this happens. You make a sale, this happens, right? So you can link all of these things together. You can do it so that it's automatic in the case of Zoom, or you can do it so that it's like a manual thing, right? Either way. But either way, it's really, really easy to do. Very, very easy. And what gets really interesting is that we track that and we track it. And you can put maps up. I'm sure you've seen it on your website. Everything is linked back to the global goals, and so it's all counting your impact on those things that we have to do by 2030. Otherwise, we're history. those 17 goals and the 169 targets underneath it. And by the way, the way we measure all that and show it is we don't talk about the dollars. We talk about, that was the impact. It's right there, and so it changes up. And we even have cases where, there's one lady, she told me this. I remember this because it was my last flight occurred after it. So it was on the 11th of March in 2020. Mm-hmm. And she had just joined B1G1, and she was telling the night before, the day before, and she was telling a whole lot of people about that in the morning. And she said, I went home, this was in Melbourne, and I went home and I told my family that, I joined B1G1 and told them about it. And so we had a lovely time. And then I said to our 10-year-old son, Daniel, this is her talking to Daniel, Daniel, it's time to do the washing up. And she said, and Daniel's face, remember I talked about rolling eyes? Daniel's face was like, washing, the typical sort of thing that you might expect from a 10-year-old kid. And she said, oh, well, we can B1G1 that. And I said, what do you mean? So she creates the account, it's up on the phone, and she puts in the activity, when Daniel does the dishes, okay? And then you link it. And so Daniel's looking through these 500 projects and he says, oh, look at this. There's one that gives water. That's sort of sensible because I'm using water for the thing. So, and he says, oh my goodness, look at that. It's just a cent. And what do you think? Can we do 11 of them? And then just sure. So he's got this thing, whenever I do the washing up, 11 kids. And then he says, does that come out of my pocket money or would you advance me the money? But anyway, the crucial thing is that Daniel has not done the dishes. So, I mean, as in he keeps doing the dishes, right? Because there's something, there's like a ritual now, if you see what I mean. And so that's, I think, one of the great things about B1G1, that we can lock these things in. So yeah, it's
absolutely
really fun.
Love that.
Really, really
so
fun.
What kind of businesses would you say would benefit most from being part of the B1G1 community?
Well, I get amazed at the, there's podcast hosts, there's coaches, there's accountants, there's lawyers, there's manufacturers, there's
restaurants, pest control
exactly,
companies,
yeah, the whole
every business,
the whole, the whole thing. It's like it's very, very, very interesting. Magicians,
oh yeah.
So yeah, it's very. All we need is Apple to say every time we download.
Well, I don't know about Apple, but and again, that's one of the magical things that happened to me by switching my entire shift from profit to impact, is that I got connected to someone that is a partner with someone from the Buffett family. So, and that person is one of my business partners and a great friend. And I would like to introduce you to him. He's hosting a conference in February during the World Charity Month, where it's going to be around between 6,000 to 10,000 people attending, and Mary Buffett will be there attending that as well. So
seriously.
Yes, I will connect you to them, and it would be an honor maybe to even have you guys be some way connected or present in that event, because everybody is going to be attending will be heart-driven entrepreneur, business person at every level, and it would be a no-brainer for them to be introduced. I'm sure most of them already know what you guys are doing, but I will connect you with my good friend Sugdev. He's the person I'm referring to. So that would be.
You're amazing. See, everybody listening, remember we said we're all connected. Remember that?
There's saying that we're all three connections away from every person on the planet.
It used to be 6, right? But now it's 3.
Yeah.
That's exactly
and I will connect you to another 2 people, amazing people that I know. One is a wonderful lady from India. Have you heard of the organization called Deepalaya? It's an organization in India that's been around for about 40 plus years, that's helping street children, taking kids from the streets of the slums of India and putting them, giving him a life, giving him education, all that. I want you to connect you to that lady. Maybe there's some opportunity, because she would
Please
love to be
do, because
part of that.
we are seeing, we are seeing.
Mhm.
I mean, very obviously, we every day.
Yes.
We remember. You remember when I talked
Mhm.
about the 250 million impacts,
Mhm.
right? Let me tell you
Absolutely.
how we think about those impacts. We see every single one of those as a
Mhm.
smile. That's how we see it.
Totally. It's about, one quote I saw on the website, especially from the article written by this pest company in London.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
Michael
loved
Kurtz, yeah.
I love that quote. It says, "This is not charity. This is part of us. We don't give to charity. We give to other human beings around the world."
There you go. Exactly right.
That's the most beautiful sentence. One of the most beautiful sentences ever. And
Yeah,
there's another
that's exactly
lady
right.
I would like to connect you to, is my good friend Megla. She is a beautiful heart. She's also based in Singapore. Actually, she's an e-commerce
Oh,
lady.
really?
She organizes sourcing trips for India, and what she to India, and then what she did last time that we were able to travel, for every person that signed up for a program, she sponsored a child's education for a year in India.
There you go.
And
There you go.
I would love to connect. I would love to connect you to these amazing people, so together we can. One of my
Oh,
favorite
and then
saying is,
we would be able to do the reverse, because there are
Mhm.
so many people doing
Mhm.
amazing things
Absolutely. And we
with
need to bring these
children.
people, light on these people. One of the things I love as
Sure.
part of my branding is the 1+1 in math might be 2, but in real life is 11, because when we put our efforts together, especially we're on the same page, it exponentially explodes. So I
Right.
will do whatever I can to connect you to incredible people, to get your impact, not only impact to even further, but to make, I strongly believe that not any single individual can change the world by themselves, but if each of us, we can do a
Oh,
little
no,
bit
you
in our
can't.
own
That's it.
in
Together.
our small little circle of influence, we can create a ripple, an unstoppable ripple effect around the world. And you guys are the best, some of the best, ambassadors of that. So anyone I can do in my own little modest way to help you guys, it would be my utmost honor. So Paul, Mr. Paul, it's been an absolute honor having you. I'm mindful of your time. I know I could speak to you for hours. I have so many more questions I haven't even asked, but I know you're a busy man.
Oh, well,
So
we'll do it again. Let's do it again.
I would be honored to do a second part in a few weeks or
Let's
whatnot, because
do
there's
it.
so much
Part
more.
two.
Absolutely.
Part
I'm
two.
honored. I will connect you with these people. I will, yeah. So I salute you, sir. You're a true leader with a heart. Keep
Well,
shining your wonderful light in this world. God bless, my friend.
yes, and just could I just say,
Yes,
I've loved every moment of being with you. So I'm looking forward to more.
it means the world to me. I really mean it. There's love it. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay
Thank you.
awesome.
And
God
thank you for
bless.
listening too.
Yes, and I would love to, and I wish you to be able to shine your light for the next million years on this planet.
Together with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. God bless, my friend.
Catch
Take
you
care.
soon.
Cheers.
Lots of
Bye bye.
love.